He called me a failure in the house I built with my own 2 hands. My son just watched. They thought they had broken me. They were about to find out that even old wood can burn. The sting of the red wine hit my face first. Cold, sharp, and bitter. It soaked the collar of the white shirt Helen, my late wife, bought me. The shirt I wore to my retirement party. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. My name is Frank Peterson, and I need to tell you how my sanctuary became my prison and how I burned it down to escape. The dining room went completely silent. Not a fork moved. The crystal glass, now empty in Lisa's hand, didn't even wobble. She held it tight, her knuckles white. The only sound was the Merlot pooling on the hardwood floor, a floor I laid myself, plank by careful plank. 40 years ago, when I first built this house for Helen, I looked at Lisa, my daughter-in-law. Her face, usually masked in polite indifference, was twisted. A sneer, her eyes, always cold and calculating, blazed with a fury I'd never seen directed at me so openly. "You will not ruin my life, Frank," she shrieked. Her voice was high, tight, vibrating with rage. "You cannot move back in here. This is my house. My house." The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Then I looked at my son, Michael. He sat at the head of the table. My spot? The spot I used to occupy. He was staring intently at his plate, as if the pattern on the china held the secrets of the universe. His shoulders were hunched, his face pale. He said nothing. He always said nothing. That silence was a betrayal all its own. This house, the 4-bedroom colonial on Elm Street. I was a contractor my whole life. This house was my masterpiece. Every nail, every beam, every tile was a memory. Memories of sweat and sawdust, of Helen bringing me lemonade on hot summer afternoons, of Michael learning to ride his bike in the driveway. It was meant to be our foundation, a legacy, a sanctuary for the family I thought I had. I didn't realize the foundation was rotten. For 5 years since Michael and Lisa married, I let them live here, rent-free. After Helen died, the house felt too big, too empty. I rattled around in it like a marble in a jar. The silence was deafening. It amplified the grief. So I moved into a small apartment downtown. I was happy to see the house filled with life again. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was helping them build a future. The start Helen and I never had. I didn't realize I was just being used. The dinner tonight was supposed to be simple. Just the 3 of us. I had come over because I needed help. The small construction business I'd run for decades had finally folded. The big companies squeezed me out, underbid me at every turn. My retirement savings weren't stretching far enough. The rent on my apartment had just spiked. I was drowning. Slowly but surely. I needed a lifeline. I needed my home. But asking felt like swallowing glass. It would just be for a few months, I had explained. I tried to keep my voice steady. I rubbed my thumb against my rough index finger, a nervous habit from years of handling lumber. I hated feeling vulnerable, hated asking for help in the home I built. "Just until I figure things out," I continued. "I can take the small guest room in the back. You won't even know I'm here." Michael looked uncomfortable. He pushed his mashed potatoes around his plate, avoiding my eyes. But Lisa's reaction? It was immediate and explosive. She didn't see a father needing help. She saw an intruder threatening her kingdom. "Absolutely not," she snapped. Her voice cut through the tension like a buzzsaw. "We need that room." "For what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "It's full of storage." "It's my home office," she said, tapping her long acrylic nails on the table. Tap, tap, tap. "I'm starting my consulting business, Frank. You know that. We have a life here, our own routine." She waved her hand dismissively. "You gave us this house." Gave. That word stung more than the wine eventually would. "I let you live here, Lisa." "There's a difference," I said. Maybe sharper than I intended. The frustration had been building for months. It wasn't just the house. It was the way she treated me, like an inconvenient piece of furniture. The way she redecorated, erasing Helen, room by room. Helen's yellow wallpaper, the one she picked out so carefully, painted over in a cold, sterile gray. The comfortable armchair I used to sit in every night, banished to the basement. The family photos on the mantel, replaced with modern art that looked like someone had spilled paint on a canvas. She was stripping the soul out of my home, and I was letting her, but not tonight. That's when she stood up, Her chair scraped violently against the floor. The sound echoed in the room. "Gave?" she yelled, her voice rising to a shriek. "You owe us. We are the ones maintaining this property. We are the ones paying the utilities." "I pay the property taxes, Lisa," I corrected her, my voice rising too. My thumb rubbed harder against my finger. "I have always paid the taxes, and I paid for the new roof last year." $20,000. "Well, that's the least you can do," she screamed. The veins in her neck were bulging. She took a step closer to me. She leaned over the table, her face inches from mine. The smell of her expensive perfume mixed with the aroma of the dinner. She was breathing hard, her eyes locked on mine, daring me to fight back. "You are a selfish old man," she hissed, the words dripping with venom, "trying to sponge off us because you failed in your business. It's not our fault you can't manage your money. We will not be burdened by your failures." Failed. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. My life's work, my sweat, my sacrifice, reduced to failure. I looked at Michael. He was still staring at his plate. A statue carved from cowardice. And then the wine. She didn't hesitate. She just grabbed the glass and threw the contents directly in my face. Now standing there, dripping Merlot, I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The hurt was there, deep and throbbing. Deep and throbbing Merlot. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The hurt was there, deep and throbbing, a physical ache in my chest. But above the pain was a sudden terrifying clarity. I looked around the room again. At the expensive modern furniture Lisa insisted on buying. Financed, I realized, by the money they saved not paying rent for 5 years. I looked at my son, a stranger who wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at the woman who thought she owned everything I had worked my entire life for. They thought I was weak. They were about to find out how strong I really was. I slowly reached for a linen napkin. It was one of the new ones Lisa bought, stiff and gray. I dabbed at my face, careful not to smear the stain further on Helen's shirt. I put the napkin down. My hands were surprisingly steady. "You seem to be mistaken about a few things, Lisa," I said. My voice was low but firm. "Very mistaken." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I turned and walked out of the dining room. Through the hallway I had painted. Out the front door I had hung. I didn't look back. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard Lisa start yelling again, her voice high and hysterical, followed by the muffled, weak sound of Michael trying to calm her down. It was the sound of a world about to collapse. The night air was cool on my damp skin. It felt good, cleansing. I got into my old pickup truck. The engine sputtered in the cold. Before finally catching, I wasn't heading back to my apartment. I was heading somewhere else. Somewhere the truth was hiding. I was heading to my storage unit on the other side of town. The storage unit smelled like dust, old paper and sawdust. The smell of my life. I unlocked the rusty padlock and pulled up the metal door. It screeched in protest. Inside, under the flickering fluorescent light, were the remnants of my business, and the memories I couldn't bear to keep in the apartment. Helen's sewing machine, my old drafting table, boxes of Michael's childhood toys. It felt like a tomb. I went straight to the back, to the metal filing cabinet labeled property. My hands were shaking now, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline. I pulled out the thick folder for the Colonial on Elm Street. I sat on an old trunk, my breath misting in the cold air, and opened it. There it was. The deed, the mortgage payoff letter from 20 years ago, the title insurance, all in my name. Frank James Peterson. I had always intended to transfer the house to Michael. We had talked about it. "One day, son, this will all be yours." But then Helen got sick. The medical bills piled up. The grief after she passed was overwhelming. And then life just kept happening. I just never filed the paperwork. I forgot. It seemed so insignificant at the time. Now, it was everything. I had let them believe it was theirs by default, by right of occupancy. But legally, it was mine. Lisa thought she had power because she lived in a big house. She didn't understand that the power was mine, and I had just lent it to her. It was time to take it back. A sudden wave of guilt washed over me, cold and heavy. Was I really about to do this? Was I about to punish my son for his wife's behavior? Michael was a good boy once. I remembered him helping me sand, drywall, his face covered in dust, grinning proudly. I looked at the deed again. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. But that boy was gone. The man sitting at the table tonight hadn't said a word when that wine hit my face. He didn't defend me. He didn't apologize. His silence was a choice, a betrayal. He had chosen her. Now I had to choose myself. I pulled out my cell phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Mr. Evans. He was Helen's cousin, a sharp real estate lawyer. He answered on the fourth ring. "Frank? Is that you?" His voice was groggy with sleep. "It's nearly midnight. I need your help, Evans," I said, my voice rough. "I'm selling the house on Elm Street." There was a pause. "The house Michael lives in?" "Yes," I said, "and I need to do it fast." The next morning, I met with Mr. Evans in his office. It was a sleek, modern place that smelled of expensive coffee, a stark contrast to my dusty storage unit. I laid the deed on his desk, and I told him what happened. I didn't leave out the part about the wine. I still wore the stained shirt, like evidence of the crime. Evans looked grim. He poured me a cup of coffee and leaned back in his leather chair. "Frank, I'm so sorry. That's despicable behavior." He tapped his pen rapidly on the desk. Tap, tap. A nervous habit that reminded me of Lisa's nails. "But I have to tell you," he continued, "legally, you are in the clear. The house is yours. Unequivocally." He paused. "And the market right now? It's insane. Houses in that neighborhood are selling in days, way over asking price." "Good," I said. The coffee was bitter, but I drank it anyway. "I want it sold fast. Cash buyers preferred. I don't want a long, drawn-out process. I wanted them out, as quickly as possible. We need a strategy," Evans said, his pen tapping faster. "They are tenants. Technically, even without a lease, we have to give them formal notice to vacate. Usually 30 days in this state. 30 days. Too long. Fine. Start the clock today. And list the house today. It's going to get messy, Frank," he warned. He looked me straight in the eye. "If they decide to fight, they could delay the sale. They could damage the property. Lisa seems volatile. Let them try," I said. The cold resolve hardened in my chest. I built that house from a patch of mud. I can handle messy. The listing went live that afternoon. Charming colonial, prime location, price to sell. It felt strange seeing my home advertised online, reduced to statistics and photographs. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. My phone rang that evening. I was sitting in my apartment eating a microwave dinner. The screen lit up with Michael's name. The familiar ache returned to my chest. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, immediately. I sighed and answered. I had to face him sooner or later. "Dad, what is this?" His voice was strained, panicked, high-pitched. "I'm looking at a listing for our house online. Lisa's hysterical. She's screaming. Is this some kind of sick joke?" "Hello, Michael. It's not a joke. The house is for sale. But we live here. This is our home." He was shouting now, the panic turning into anger. The anger I wish he had shown last night. "You can't just sell our home out from under us." "It's my home, Michael," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Matter of fact, I checked the deed. I own it. And I've decided to liquidate my assets." "Liquidate? Dad, we're your family." "Are we?" The question hung in the air between us, cold and heavy. He started pleading, the anger dissolving into desperation. "Dad, please don't do this. Lisa's a mess. She didn't mean what she said last night." "She didn't mean it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "She was stressed," he insisted, scrambling for excuses. "Her business launch is costing more than we expected." Excuses. Just like always. Justifying the unjustifiable. If he couldn't see the truth now, he never would. She threw wine in my face. "Michael," I said, the words tasting like ash. "In my own home. And you sat there." I was in shock. I didn't know what to do, he cried. "Dad, please, where are we supposed to go? We have no savings. We put everything into this house." That was the biggest lie of all, and it raised a question I hadn't considered. Why did they have no savings? "You put nothing into that house, Michael. You lived there for free for 5 years, while I paid the taxes, while I paid for the roof. My voice hardened. I suggest you start packing. Your official notice will be delivered tomorrow. By courier. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking. Talking to my son like that felt unnatural. Wrong. It felt like I was betraying my own blood. But the image of Helen kept me going. How heartbroken she would be by his weakness. How furious she would be at his betrayal. He had made his choice. Now I had made mine. And there was no going back. The next few days were a blur of chaos. Lisa called repeatedly. I stopped answering. Her voicemails piled up. They ranged from hysterical sobbing to vicious, venomous threats. She threatened to sue me for emotional distress. She threatened to claim squatters' rights. And then the final message. Her voice was low, cold, and terrifying. If I can't have this house, Frank, no one will. She hissed. I will burn it to the ground before I let you take it from me. That last one got my attention. I believed her. I forwarded all the messages to Mr. Evans. He listened to them calmly. Then he sent a cease and desist letter to Lisa, warning her that any damage to the property or further threats would result in a lawsuit and criminal charges. She's grasping at straws, Frank. Evans assured me over the phone. She has no legal standing, but we need to be careful. Her volatility makes her dangerous. He paused. We need eyes inside the house. We scheduled an open house for the weekend. It was risky, but necessary. We needed to sell the house fast. Evans hired a private security guard, a big guy named Mark, dressed in a suit, to stand by the front door, just in case. I couldn't bear to go myself. I didn't want to see the house, to see them. I didn't want to see the sterile gray walls that had replaced Helen's warmth. But I needed to know what was happening. I needed a witness. I called my old neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, a kind woman who lived across the street. She had known Helen for years. They used to garden together. Mrs. Jenkins, it's Frank Peterson, I said. I need a favor, a big one. I asked her to go to the open house, to look around, and report back. She agreed immediately. Her loyalty was to Helen and to me. She called me afterward. Her voice trembled with distress. Frank, it was awful, she reported. I could hear her wringing her hands over the phone. The anxiety in her voice was palpable. They didn't even try to clean up. It looked like a disaster zone. What do you mean? I asked. My stomach tightening, dishes piled high in the sink. Laundry everywhere. Boxes scattered all over the living room. It smelled bad, like old food and stale air. My house, the home Helen kept immaculate, ruined, and that woman, Lisa. Mrs. Jenkins continued, her voice filled with disgust. What did she do, Mrs. Jenkins? I asked, dreading the answer. She followed people around the house, Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice dropping to a whisper, telling them terrible lies. Frank, she's actively sabotaging the sale. She told one young couple that the basement floods every time it rains. A complete lie. I built that basement myself. It was bone dry. She told another that the wiring was faulty and dangerous. I wired that house. It was up to code and beyond. She even hinted that there was a mold problem in the walls. She was willing to destroy the value of the house, the legacy I had built, just to spite me. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. I appreciate you telling me. I hung up the phone. My anger surged again, hot and sharp. She wasn't just entitled. She was malicious. I called Evans. We need to get her out of there. Now, we can't force her out until the 30 days are up, Frank. Not without cause, Evans explained patiently. The eviction process takes time, but we can use this sabotage to our advantage. Evans sent a stern letter to Michael and Lisa, certified mail, arguing then that their interference with the sale was illegal, that any reduction in the sale price due to their actions would be pursued in court. They would owe me the difference. But I knew letters wouldn't stop Lisa. She was too desperate, too cornered. I needed leverage, real leverage, something that would force them to realize how precarious their situation truly was. I needed to understand why they were so desperate, why they had no savings after 5 years of free housing, Michael had a good job. They lived well, too well. Where did all the money go? And that's when I found it. The truth they thought they had buried. If this story has your heart racing, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Every click helps us keep uncovering stories that deserve to be heard. I decided to check my finances. It was something I hadn't done thoroughly in a long time. I trusted Daclo. I still had a joint savings account with him, opened when he was a teenager. I hadn't touched it in years, but I occasionally checked the balance, making small deposits on birthdays and holidays, a little nest egg for his future. I also had an emergency credit card. I had added Michael to it as an authorized user, just in case. When Helen was sick, I knew how fast emergencies could drain your resources. I hadn't checked those accounts in months, maybe years. I logged into my online banking portal. The page loaded slowly. My stomach churned with a cold dread. I clicked on the savings account link. The number appeared on the screen. 0. I stared at the screen, disbelieving. Empty, drained. Over $10,000. Gone. I checked the transaction history. The transfers had happened over the last 6 months. Small amounts at first, then larger chunks, all transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be right. This had to be a mistake. My son wouldn't do this to me, but the numbers didn't lie. I switched to the credit card account. The balance was staggering, maxed out, $20,000. I looked at the charges. Designer clothing stores in the city. Expensive restaurants I could never afford. A spa retreat in Arizona. Airline tickets to Miami. And just yesterday, a large cash advance, used for a deposit at a luxury apartment complex downtown. The kind with a doorman and a pool on the roof. They weren't broke. They were living a high life. On my dime. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were stealing from me. They were spending my money while trying to stop me from selling my house. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking betrayal. It was staggering. I felt a surge of anger so intense it frightened me. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This wasn't just entitlement. This was theft. This was fraud. $30,000. This changed everything. It explained their desperation, their lack of savings, and Lisa's explosive reaction to the idea of me moving in. They were terrified I would find out. They were rue de lie, funded by my generosity and my stolen money. They hadn't just insulted me. They had robbed me blind. I picked up the phone and called the bank. My hands were shaking with rage. I need to report unauthorized charges and transfers, I said, my voice cold and hard. I need to freeze these accounts. Immediately. The bank was surprisingly helpful. A fraud investigator, Agent Miller, took my statement. His voice was calm, methodical. We see the activity, Mr. Peterson, Agent Miller said. It looks suspicious. The transfers were initiated from an IP address matching the Elm Street house. They had the evidence. They froze the credit card. They started an investigation into the transfers. I knew this would cause chaos for Michael and Lisa. Their lifeline was cut. The facade they had built was about to crumble. But I didn't care. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had stolen more than my money. They had stolen my trust. They wanted a war. Now they had one. The next day, Mr. Evans called. His voice was upbeat. Frank, despite Lisa's best efforts at sabotage, the market is too strong, he said. The bones of the house, the quality of the construction, they spoke for themselves. He paused for dramatic effect. We have an offer, I repeated, barely daring to hope. A cash offer, slightly below asking because of the condition of the interior and the tenant situation, but still a very good price. Frank, it's a significant amount of money, life-changing money. I felt a wave of relief so strong I had to sit down. The tension drained out of me, leaving me exhausted, but resolute. That's great news. The buyers are investors, Evans explained. They flip houses. They don't care about the mess. They want the property. Perfect. But there's a catch, Evans warned. They want possession immediately after the 30-day notice period is up. They want to start renovations right away. No delays. We need to be sure they will be out. Accept the offer, I said, my voice firm. They will be out. I knew they would have no choice. The contract was signed. The closing was finalized. The money was in escrow. The clock was ticking. They had 2 weeks left. 2 weeks until their world collapsed. Michael called me again. His voice was frantic, desperate. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure terror. Dad? The credit card was declined. I said nothing. I just listened to the panic in his voice. Our bank account is frozen, he stammered. We can't access our money. The deposit for the apartment, they canceled our application. We're going to lose it. We have nowhere to go. The consequences were finally catching up to them. You stole from me, Michael, I said, my uterus cold and dead. No emotion left, just the facts. Silent. You stole $10,000 from the savings account. I continued, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You maxed out my credit card. $30,000, Michael. That's fraud. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then a strangled sound, a sob. It was Lisa. She did it. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know, he cried. The cowardice surfacing again, always blaming someone else. Always refusing to take responsibility. It made me sick. You were an authorized user, Michael. You benefited from the theft, I said, cutting him off. I didn't look at the statements. She handles the finances. You enjoyed the vacations, the dinners, the lifestyle, I continued. Relentless. You stood by while she stole from me, just like you stood by while she humiliated me. I took a deep breath. You knew, Michael. You knew, and you said nothing. Michael broke down completely. He started sobbing, deep, racking sobs. I don't know what to do. Lisa's losing her mind. She won't pack. She just sits in the living room, drinking and screaming. Screaming at who? Me. She blames me for everything. She says I ruined her life. He paused. I'm scared, Dad. I'm really scared. For a moment, a fleeting second, I felt a flicker of pity. He was weak. He was a coward, but he was still my son. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making. But the pity died quickly, extinguished by the memory of the wine hitting my face, the memory of the empty bank account. He had allowed this toxicity to fester. He had nurtured it with his silence. You need to grow up, Michael, I said. My voice softened slightly, a trace of the father I used to be creeping in, but the steel remained. You need to take responsibility for your life, for your choices. I can't help you anymore. I delivered the final blow. The bank is investigating the fraud. What happens next is out of my hands. I hung up. I felt exhausted, drained. This victory didn't feel sweet. It felt necessary, but profoundly bitter. I had won the battle, but I had lost my son. The grief was a heavy shroud, suffocating me, but I had to keep going. I had to finish this, for Helen, and for myself. The next 2 weeks dragged by. I packed up my small apartment. The lease was ending anyway. Perfect timing. I found a lovely little condo in a quiet neighborhood across town, near the park where Helen and I used to walk. It was small, but it was peaceful. I didn't need just the essentials, and Helen's thing. But I realized there were still things in the Elm Street house that I wanted. Things that belonged to me. Things that held memories. Lisa couldn't erase. The furniture I had built by hand in my workshop. The solid oak dining table. The bookshelves. The photo albums chronicling a lifetime of memories. The antique clock that had belonged to Helen's grandmother. And the portrait of Helen. The one that hung above the fireplace. The one where her eyes sparkled with laughter. I had to get them. I didn't want to go back there. I didn't want to face the emptiness, the ghosts, the potential confrontation with Lisa. The thought of stepping foot in that house again made me feel physically ill. The memories were tainted now, poisoned by the betrayal. But I couldn't leave those things behind. They were all I had left of Helen. They were the heart of the home I had built. I had to go back one last time. I hired a team of professional movers. I arranged for them to meet me at the house on the final day, the day Michael and Lisa were legally required to be gone. I also asked Evans to send the security guard Mark again, just in case. I wasn't taking any chances. Lisa was unpredictable. I pulled up to the house. The mover's truck rumbled behind me. The lawn was overgrown, littered with trash. The curtains were drawn. It looked desolate, abandoned. A shell of the home it once was. The sight twisted something in my chest. This was not how it was supposed to end. Mark was already there, waiting by the porch. He was chewing gum subtly, his face impassive, but his eyes were grim. The real estate agent just finished the final walkthrough. "Mr. Peterson," he said, his voice low, "they are gone." I felt a small wave of relief. At least I wouldn't have to face them. But the house... Mark shook his head. "It's bad, sir." My heart sank. I knew what was coming. I unlocked the front door. The door I had hung 40 years ago. The smell hit me immediately. Stale wine, rotting food, dust, and something else. Something bitter and metallic. Malice. The house was mostly empty. They had taken their expensive, modern furniture. Their clothes, but they had left behind a trail of destruction. A final act of spite. I walked through the hallway. The gray paint Lisa loved was ruined, stained with what looked like grease, and something dark smeared across the walls. I didn't want to know what it was. The carpets were torn and soiled. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. In the kitchen, the granite countertops were cracked, as if someone had taken a hammer to them. The cabinet doors were ripped off their hinges. In the living room, my breath caught in my throat. They had taken a knife to the upholstery of the armchair I had retrieved from the basement. The stuffing pulled out like entrails. It wasn't accidental damage. It was intentional vandalism. They had tried to destroy the past, just as they had destroyed the present. They wanted to hurt me, and they succeeded. The antique clock, Helen's grandmother's clock, smashed on the floor. The glass shattered. The pendulum silenced. "They did this out of spite," the mover foreman said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Some people are just rotten." "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice hollow. "The buyers are gutting the place anyway." But it did matter. It was a final act of violation, a desecration of the memories I held dear. I walked over to the fireplace. My eyes closed, dreading what I would find. I opened them. Helen's portrait was still there, smiling down at the wreckage, untouched. A small miracle. I carefully lifted it off the wall. It was heavy. The frame solid oak. I had made the frame myself. As I was carrying it towards the door, I heard a noise from the kitchen. A scraping sound. Then a muffled sob. I froze. They weren't gone after all. I signaled to Mark. He stopped chewing his gum. His hand went to his hip. I walked towards the kitchen, and there she was. Lisa. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled wine. She was drinking straight from a bottle. She looked up at me, her eyes red, swollen, and vacant. The expensive clothes she wore were dirty and torn. The mask of sophistication was gone, revealing the emptiness beneath. "Here to gloat?" she spat, her voice raw, slurred. "I'm here for what's mine," I said quietly. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind only ashes. I just felt a profound pity for this broken, vicious woman. Lisa laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the empty house. "Take it all. Take everything. You ruined us, Frank. You destroyed my life, my business, my future." She still didn't get it. She still blamed everyone but herself. "You ruined your own life." "Lisa," I said, my voice steady, "I gave you a home, the foundation. You treated it like a possession you were entitled to. You treated me like an obstacle to be removed. I listed the charges against her, one by one. You stole from me. You disrespected me. And you threw a glass of wine in my face. We were a family," she screamed, scrambling to her feet. She swayed slightly, drunk, fueled by desperation and rage. "Families help each other. Families forgive. You were supposed to take care of us." "Family doesn't steal," I said, my voice rising now. "Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't betray the person who provides everything." I shook my head. You never wanted a family, Lisa. You wanted a lifestyle. She lunged at me, the bottle raised like a weapon, her face contorted in a mask of hatred. Mark stepped forward, reaching for his cuffs. But I held up my hand. I wanted her to see the truth. I wanted her to understand the consequences of her actions. "It's over, Lisa," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "It's done. You have nothing left. No home, no money, no future. You have lost everything." She stopped, the fight draining out of her. The bottle slipped from her hand, shattered on the floor. The wine splashed across the ruined tiles, red like blood. She looked around the empty, destroyed kitchen, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. The silence was heavy, broken only by her ragged breaths. She sank back to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, the sound echoing the emptiness of the house. I turned to look at the doorway. Michael was standing there. He looked haggard, exhausted, broken. He had a suitcase in his hand. He must have been waiting in the car, too ashamed to face me. Until he heard the commotion, he looked at Lisa, crumpled on the floor, then at me. His eyes met mine for the first time in weeks. There was no anger, no resentment, just a deep, profound sadness and shame. "Michael, help me," Lisa pleaded from the floor, reaching out to him, the desperation clinging to her like a shroud. "Don't let him do this. Don't leave me." Michael just shook his head. He walked over to Lisa and gently pulled her up. His touch was devoid of affection, just a weary resignation. "Come on, Lisa. We have to go," he said, his voice tired. "It's not our house anymore." He led her towards the front door, her sobs echoing in the hallway. He paused, his hand on the knob. He turned back to me. I was still holding Helen's portrait. "The portrait," he whispered, his eyes fixed on Helen's face. "Mom loved that portrait." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. Tears streamed down his face. The words choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was weak. I betrayed you. I betrayed her. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The wounds were too deep. The betrayal too profound." But I nodded, a small acknowledgement of the apology I never thought I would hear, a fragile seed of hope in the barren landscape of our relationship. He walked out the door, closing it softly behind him. I waited until I heard their car pull away. The silence in the house was heavy, absolute. I carried Helen's portrait out to my truck. The movers finished loading the few remaining pieces of furniture that hadn't been destroyed. I locked the door one last time and handed the keys to Mark to give to Mr. Evans. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The house stood there, empty and silent, a monument to the family that had broken apart within its walls. The sale finalized the next day. The money hit my bank account. It was a staggering amount, more money than I had ever had in my life. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days, enough to ensure Helen's legacy was secure, that I would never be a burden to anyone. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. I moved into my new condo. It was small, but peaceful. The balcony overlooked the park. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I hung Helen's portrait in the living room. It dominated the space, her smile filling the room with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I heard rumors about Michael and Lisa. They separated shortly after the eviction. The fraud investigation concluded. I chose not to press criminal charges. I couldn't send my own son to jail, but the bank pursued them for the debt. $30,000. Lisa's consulting business never launched. Her reputation was ruined. Michael lost his job. He moved across the state, trying to start over. Mrs. Jenkins told me he was working in construction, learning the trade I had tried to teach him years ago. I never contacted him. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Was I too harsh, too unforgiving? But then I remember the sting of the wine on my face, the coldness of my son's silence, the calculated cruelty of their betrayal, the theft, the vandalism, the desecration of the home. I built with love. I learned a hard lesson. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, love. And when those things are gone, the blood means nothing. I learned that generosity is not a weakness, and that forgiveness must be earned, not demanded. One evening, a few months later, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the colors Helen loved. I held a glass of wine in my hand. What wine this time? I thought about the house, the memories, the pain. I had built that house with love, hoping it would be a sanctuary. But I realized that a sanctuary isn't about brick and mortar. It's not about the walls that surround you. It's about the peace within you. I looked at Helen's portrait. We're okay now, Helen, I whispered. A single tear rolled down my cheek, the grief finally releasing its hold on my heart, replaced by a quiet acceptance. We're finally okay. I took a sip of the wine. It was cool and crisp. I was finally home, and I never looked back. Thanks for listening. Please rate this story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot, because your time matters.